Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Strategy Game Podcast. I am super excited about our guest today, Mr. Alex Judd, talking all things leadership. He is the founder of Path for Growth. And Alex, this is a newer venture for you, so welcome.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm just absolutely excited about this. This is going to be a lot of fun.
It is going to be fun. We had some great conversation leading up to this, and so I'm excited to ask you these questions. And you've had quite a bit of experience in the podcast space, but I would love for you to just share your story of how you got where you are today. I know for a lot of us, it's a winding road. So I would love to hear about your winding road and how you ended up.
Yeah, winding road is right. Sometimes I ask myself, how did I get here today? How did this actually happen? Gosh, I always go back to, there was a moment, I think we all have those kind of quintessential moments that we look back to whenever we were kids that we say, I don't know what happened there, but something happened there. Yeah. And for whatever reason, this is a moment that I remember. My mom was folding laundry and I was in second grade. Okay. And in second grade, I vividly remember looking my mom in the eyes and saying, when I grow up, I don't think I want to be a motivational speaker, but I think it would be fun to be a motivational teacher.
Wow.
Wow, in second grade? Who does that?
Yeah.
She looked at me. She's like, "Who are you? Like, what are you talking about?" And she probably said, "Like, go play outside. Like, go do something. What are you talking about?" But I literally, I look back on that moment and I say, okay, there was something in there. Yeah. Because although it kind of went underground for a while after that, I was drawn for a long time to people like Zig Ziglar and people like John Maxwell and incredible communicators like Andy Stanley. And I just watched these people and there was something inside of me that responded to that. And I wasn't necessarily at the time saying, that's what I want to do. I was just I was enthralled.
Yes. And
the way kids my age in fourth grade and fifth grade were enthralled with NSYNC, I was enthralled with Zig Ziglar, right? And I didn't realize that wasn't normal, right? And that's what I think calling, we teach a lot on calling in Path for Growth. Calling a lot of times is something that you consider commonplace that actually is not normal at all. It's completely unnatural. And so that I kind of had this thing inside of me, and what I started to define later on, probably towards the end of college, was that the intersection that I fell in love with was the intersection of leadership and effective communication. When those two things collide, I just light up and I just get so excited about it. And so it was after college that I started working with a leadership development not-for-profit associated with the church that I'd gone to for several years. Mm-hmm. And that was just so much fun because it was like a leadership sandbox. It operated on its own P&L, and I got to work with all these highly influential people in the Austin area, and I just got to learn at an extremely rapid pace, largely by honestly making a lot of mistakes. Yeah. And it was in the process of doing several internships in college and doing that job that I became honestly a customer of EntreLeadership. I just started consuming EntreLeadership's business and leadership content via the podcast. Yeah. And at that time, I know you're familiar with that podcast, Lauren. At that time, Ken Coleman was the host of that program, and he was like my hero. I was like, that guy's, and he still is. I mean, that guy's just awesome, incredible interviewer. Yep. And so I still believe the EntreLeadership podcast is some of the best business and leadership free advice in the world. It's just unreal, the guests they get and what they do. And so I remember where I was on my run one day whenever I thought to myself, well, that would be a cool place to work one day. And I always tell people, what's that?
Another big thought. That was a moment. That was another moment.
That's right. Yeah. That was a moment. And I always tell people 14 interviews later, I ended up getting a job there. So they have quite a process at Ramsey Solutions. But ended up working there for 4 years. It was such a God thing that I ended up getting to host the podcast that made me aware of Ramsey Solutions 3 years into that role. And then eventually I had spent so much time around entrepreneurs and around leaders that I literally came to the conclusion that I wanted to be one. Amazing. And it was an incredibly, outrageously gut-wrenching decision to leave an organization like Ramsey Solutions, because Dave is one of the strongest leaders I've ever worked with. But made the decision to leave and start what we now call Path for Growth. And we exist to help impact-driven leaders step into who they are created to be so that others may benefit and God may be glorified. And we're 7 months in now, and I am having more fun than I've ever had in my entire life.
You're doing what you set out to do, what you didn't know in second grade, right? It's wild because I talk about this. I love that story, and it's such a winding road, but you always knew that theme was always there throughout your life, like that theme or current. I always tell people, like, look for the themes or currents throughout your life, because that will help you draw closer to your calling or what it is that you're supposed to walk in, right? So that identity-based strategy piece, that's what it is. It's really a two-part approach. Like, who are you? Where do you come from? And what is your calling, and walking in that? And then doing the same for your organization. And I think what's awesome about the work that you do is you really help draw that out of people and help them get closer to walking in that, right? That's so cool.
Gosh, I wish when I was in second grade, I had Lauren Shippey saying, Alex, you need to focus on your identity-based strategy. Like, this is an important moment right now. I probably could have saved a whole lot of time and heartache if you were there.
We could have saved you a lot of years from that one thing. But listen, I'm the same. So let's dive a little bit into leadership. Tell me what you're seeing right now in leadership. What is top of mind with the leaders that you're working with? I want to step into some of their shoes. Take us inside of what that looks like right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. This is actually something just in starting this role and playing the role of founder and primary coach at Path for Growth. We have other coaches now as well. But one of the things that I've found is so valuable is to ask literally this question is, what's the theme? Because it's crazy. And I'm sure you recognize this in the people and the masterminds that you work with as well. It's almost like stuff comes in waves. And I don't know if it's because I start looking for it, but a lot of times, for whatever reason, in a given month, all the conversations are not the same, but they can be categorized in the same way in many regards. And so that's certainly been the case here lately. The big thing that I've been focused on personally lately, and that I've seen a lot of leaders and impact-driven leaders, that's who we work with, focusing on lately, is just the recognition that health and growth are not the same thing, right? Health and growth are not the same thing. And I think, especially if you're a highly driven person, if you're someone that has a track record for getting results, you kind of love that phrase, oh, if you're not growing, you're dying, and I see, I've heard guys say all the time, they cross their arms, they say, oh, if you're not growing, you're dying. And they think they're strong. They think they're brave, right? And it's true, I suppose. But at the same time, one of the lessons that I've had to learn the hard way is just because you're growing doesn't mean you're living.
That is so
true. And I know a lot of people who are growing that are just as dead as the people that aren't.
Yes.
And I know a lot of organizations that are growing, and companies and businesses and teams that are growing that are just as dead as those ones that aren't. And so health and growth are not the same thing. It's possible to be healthy while you're growing. It's just not guaranteed. And that theme has just, man, I get chills talking about it because it's so relevant to me personally right now. But then also I've seen it pop up as a result with so many of the leaders that we're working with.
Okay. So to further that point, are you speaking to rest in leaders? Are you speaking to time to do other things, to play, to have outside time, to all those things, right? Does that ultimately, you find, contribute to health, which then can lead to growth?
I think that is how it shows up for a lot of people. I don't think that's how it shows up for everyone. I think maybe the highest conceptual level of what we're talking about right now is sacrifice. And where that shows up is, if you're a leader, by nature, you have a vision for the future. And we live in a culture today that prioritizes and celebrates audacious visions of the future, which is awesome. Like I'm all about having an audacious, bold, fearless vision of the future, right? But if you only are envisioning the future of your business and you're not simultaneously being as audacious and as bold about the future of your family and about the future of your personal life and about the future of your personal well-being, then you are going to sacrifice those things, and that's not okay. Because that's not healthy, right? You may be growing, but just because you're growing doesn't mean you're healthy. And so what I'm starting to learn is like, okay, we cannot have 90 degrees of vision. We need to have 360 degrees of vision that says, okay, I need to figure out a future. I need to cast a vision of the future that does not compete with my other priorities, but rather it complements my other priorities. Because if I reach that vision of the future, but in doing so, I sacrifice why I started in the first place, and I sacrifice the values of what I stand for, and I'm miserable every step of the way, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
You know, I climb mountains, and it's always crazy to me whenever I do a 14er in Colorado. I mean, you'll spend 6, sometimes 10, sometimes 12 hours going up these mountains. And when you get up there, like, the air's pretty thin, it's pretty cold and windy, the weather gets really bad in the afternoon. So you may stay up there for maybe 10 minutes. So you better enjoy the process just as much as the destination, because if you can't do that, the 10 minutes is not worth it.
That is so good. Preach, man. I love that. That's so good.
You caught me right after way
Yeah.
too much coffee this morning.
So
So I hope.
no, I love it. I love all of that. And it's so interesting because my personal journey has been similar in the last year or two. I felt like last year was a year of rest and resetting priorities in terms of getting everything in alignment. Like, how am I doing with my family? How am I doing in my marriage with my kids? Is all of that aligned? What's the vision for that? Where are we going? And that time, actually, the quarantine time was great for our family. Started a garden, did things like I never thought I would do or take time to do, really broke all of the routines that were unhealthy. So it was just a great reset, I feel like, for us in terms of that. And what's interesting now is I feel like I'm homeschooling my kids, hybrid homeschooling my kids right now, as well as experiencing one of the greatest times of growth that I've had. But I'm very, very mindful of my boundaries, and I'm very protective of that right now. And I would not want to have experienced this time without going through that time first. And I think there was such a purpose and there was such a reason for that season, because being just thrown into it would not have been a great thing lifestyle wise as well. So I so deeply resonate with what you're talking about there. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I love that you use the word boundaries there, because what's crazy is that there's this kind of graduation that I think every leader goes through. And it took me some time to get to this point, but there was a while where I was like, oh man, if I was building a business, I don't think I could grow it to that point, right? And you can name a number, you can name a team size, you can name a number of people reached, right? And I literally had this limiting belief that I don't think it's possible. And then if you surround yourself with enough people and you study enough achievers and you read enough about entrepreneurship and leadership and people that have truly gone on to change the world, what you start to realize is not, oh my gosh, those guys are superheroes. It's, oh my gosh, those men and women are actually regular people.
Yeah.
Which is almost a little bit more intimidating, right? That's pretty crazy, because it's like, well, if they did it, then it's actually possible. And so then you get to the idea that it's possible. And you have this audacious vision of the future, and you say, okay, I can do this. Then it becomes the question of, is it worth it?
Yeah.
And what's crazy and what's so cool about what you're doing in this season, Lauren, is for a fact, and I know for a fact too, your business is going gangbusters right now. You have the ability to grow it faster than what you currently are.
Yeah.
You have the ability, but you're not willing to do that because of what you would have to sacrifice.
Yes.
And the boundaries word is an expression of your intentionality. And that's what we try to do in Path for Growth, is say, we're all going to make sacrifices. And that's just part of the gig. It's part of the game, because we're finite human beings.
Yep.
But let's make those sacrifices intentionally, instead of just letting the thing that's shiny and sexy make it for us.
Yes.
You know?
So good. So good. I am loving this conversation. I'm just so excited about it. Okay, so let's get into what you do with clients, because I want to know specifically, and for our listeners, what it really looks like when you work with leaders. I think sometimes this leadership coaching can feel esoteric a little bit. And so for our listeners, just walk us through the process. Like, what does it look like, your work at Path for Growth?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, as you and I were talking about before, it's a business that we started 7 months ago, and we are bootstrapping it from the ground up. And so it's kind of like, I always wonder how they build a bridge, right? Like, how do you get something from one side to another over this massive chasm? And it's like, oh, well, you just have to put one little slat over the bridge across at a time. That's kind of what I feel like right now. We're just creating one little slat at a time towards our future. And so we are very much, we don't have it all figured out yet, but what we do know is that it's a powerful day when an individual takes responsibility for their own healthy, life-giving, and sustainable growth. And when you do that in service of other people, there's a word for that. That's called leadership. Yeah. And so what we focus on is, whenever we work with people, either in a one-on-one coaching situation or within a group context, because we do have growth groups as well, is we say, okay, let's create the path for you to be a stronger person, a stronger leader, and a stronger business over the course of the next 6 months. Let's create your path for healthy, life-giving, and sustainable growth. And so it looks different in every arena. With regard to the personal life, we define the arenas that matter most, and then we establish unique habits for you as a person to make sure that you're practicing, not just setting big goals and just moonshot goals. You're practicing the things daily that will make you into the person you want to be permanently. That's what we focus on personally. And then within the leadership arena, it's crazy. We all say, oh, I just want to be a stronger leader. Well, leadership is a really broad thing, right? Like that. I mean, there's a billion ways. And so what I've found is, man, you grow as a leader when you get focused about the arena that you want to grow.
Yeah.
And so what we hold our leaders accountable to, that we work with, and we also hold our team accountable to this. We have everyone on a dashboard for leadership growth, where we say, what's the area? Some people say, oh, I want to focus on time management. Someone says, oh, I want to focus on organizational communication. Someone says, I want to focus on interpersonal communication. And then I'm just a big believer in that quote of, you will be the same person 6 months from now as you are today, outside of the books you read, the people you talk to, and the things you do.
True.
Right. And so we say, pick the area, and then we're going to give you a book. We're going to identify an expert that you are literally going to sit down with for an hour, and you are not going to let them ask you a single question, because you are going to grill them, and you better buy them lunch, because this is a one-sided conversation. And then we're going to define specific actions you're going to take to grow in that specific arena of leadership. And then as a business, we say, okay, let's not just work. It's very similar to what you do, Lauren. We're not just going to work in the business. We're going to work on the business by identifying strategically, how do we move this thing forward beyond ourselves? So that's a high level overview of what we do within the Path for Growth program.
That's incredible. I love how it focuses on the whole person and the whole organization in terms of growth, because I've always believed, and I think we're similar here, that it's all connected. So if there's unhealthiness at all in the person and the team within the organization, then as a whole, it can't be healthy. So I love that you're connecting those dots. I don't know that many people are actively doing that right now. So that is amazing. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Of course.
So as we wrap up here today, tell me, what tangible takeaways can our listeners take and start to think through or apply? What can they start practicing today in regards to leadership and being a healthier leader?
Yeah, well, because you just hit on it, let's focus on the personal arena a little bit.
Yeah.
So I believe that this is worth your time, because if you are not personally growing, I don't believe there's any way you're effectively leading. And I really believe that. Like, that's not like a sometimes or a maybe or you could be or possibly. Like, there are zero qualifiers to that statement. If you are not personally growing, there is no way you are effectively leading. I believe that. And conversely, if you want to start more effectively leading, start by personally growing. And so what I'm going to challenge y'all to do is choose one arena. Maybe it's the spiritual arena. Maybe it's the financial arena. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's your social life. A lot of times I coincide with leaders that they say, man, I just wish I had a social life because I'm doing so many things right now. And it's like, yeah, we all recognize that's actually really important, right? So yes, I wish you had a social life as well, right? And so maybe it's a different arena. Maybe it's with your kids. Maybe it's something else. But I want you to choose one arena. So we're identifying our focus.
Okay.
And then from there, I want you to start with the vision of the person, not of the things that you're going to do, but start with the vision of the person that you're going to be.
That's good.
And this was a powerful day for me when I recognized that the people that matter most for me, or the people that matter most to me, whenever they're at my funeral or giving my eulogy, they're not going to say, man, spiritually, that Alex, he attended church 52 out of the 52 weeks of the year and he read the Bible this many days. No, they're not going to say those things. What they're going to say, hopefully, is, man, he was committed, he was energetic, he was faithful, he was consistent, he was bold. And so for your financial world or for your spiritual world or with regard to your marriage, don't write down yet the things that you're going to do. We'll get there, but write down the person, the leader, the man, the woman that you are called to be. So write that down. And then out of that, identify one habit. One habit. If you were to do it every single day. So it's got to be small. One small thing that you could do every single day, that if you were to do it every single day, it would make you more into that person that you are called to be. That's where I believe sustainable, healthy, life-giving personal growth comes from, is choosing an area, defining who you're called to be, and then identifying one minuscule habit that will move you in a positive direction.
So good. I love it. Thank you, Alex. I feel like that's so positive for our listeners, something that they can take away and start to practice immediately. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's just been such an honor to have you. And we're excited to just track your work, follow along, and team up with you where we can. So Alex Judd, everybody.
I appreciate you, Lauren. Thank you so much. You're the best.